Okay, I officially called the September 23rd Citizens Advisory Committee for Plan 2040 to order. And first on the agenda, obviously Michael's already gone through the review for the Zoom and everything else. And he's going to start off with a review of the input from the online open house.
Yeah, great. So let me share my screen here. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, this evening is going to be, we're getting near the end here. We want to give you a review of what we learned from this big online experiment we did with an online open house, the Plan 2040 Community Engagement Home website. We also want to then brief you on some of the changes we're making to the planned land use map based on feedback we received through that. Give you a little preview of the draft plan document that we're putting together, all the final pieces and polishing, and then we'll talk through our next steps for the review and adoption process. And just to remind folks, it's been a couple months since we've met. These are the major elements of the plan. These have all, you've had a lot of input into these pieces. We started with our overall vision and themes. Then we worked on these development policy areas map and planned land use map, and both of those were put out for public review through the online tool. And then we have goals, policies, and strategies that are organized underneath these four major topics: the natural environment, built environment, healthy communities, healthy economy. And those goals, policies, and strategies were developed with extensive input from this group, as well as from the staff and the respective programs that work in those areas at the county. We've also been engaging with those staff on implementation plan and performance measures to make sure that we're very clear and accountable to implementing all these goals, policies, and strategies. And you'll see those draft pieces in the full draft plan document. So the online open house, we ran this from August 5th to September 10th, and thank you all for being our beta test group to work out the bugs on it. We had really good feedback on it. There's always things that you can improve on these things, but we were impressed that we had over 4,000 people who visited the site. Well over 950 people submitted comments. And what I want to do is share with you a bit about the demographics of the people who participated, and then we'll go through at a high level what some of those comments were. And we sent out a summary of the public feedback that we got on this to the CAC group last week, and that'll be posted online as well. This map shows a color ramp. The darker the red color, the more participation we got. So as you can see, the east side of the county was the most highly represented. The Mayo Peninsula, Broadneck Peninsula, those areas in particular had a lot of participants from the public, and not as much in the north and west. And unfortunately, this has been kind of what we've seen typically throughout this Plan 2040 process, and before that. These are the areas where communities are organized and engaged more on the land use planning at the county. So we've got a lot of work to do to increase the engagement in these other areas. It's interesting to reflect, we did this online open house tool, because of course the pandemic, we couldn't hold large in-person meetings. The original plan was to have 9 meetings around the 9 different regions of the county. And hopefully that would have brought out more of the, more folks from different areas of the county. And it just shows kind of who was able to access, who was knowledgeable and able to use this tool.
Michael, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at this and I see West River shows no responses, and I know that's not right.
Yeah, I should say that this shows we didn't have zip code data throughout all of the comments. So this shows, we asked for zip codes in the surveys around the goals. So this shows what people entered for their zip codes, and that was a voluntary entry. So this reflects about 250 entries. So it's not inclusive of everyone, but it's representative of kind of just getting a picture of what the participation was like. So it's not exhaustive, doesn't include everyone because not everyone put in zip code, and not all pieces of the multifaceted tool had opportunities to put in that geography.
Okay.
So again, when we look at a subsection of the people who gave us information about their ages, this is what that distribution looked like. About 27% 65 and older, 25% between 55 and 64, 39% between 35 and 54, and 8% 20 to 34. These numbers over on the right are the American Community Survey data. So this is the government survey, federal government survey that happens in between the decennial census. And you can see that these numbers for our survey participants were higher for those older age brackets than what we have countywide. So our respondents, those who gave us their age, tend to skew older than what the county is across. We have another graph here showing our the race and ethnicity of the respondents. And again, these were people who volunteered to give us this information. And what we saw was about 75% self-identified as white, non-Hispanic. About 19% said prefer not to say. And then we had 2% or less people identifying as Latinx, multiracial, or African American. And so again, we're overrepresented here with the white population and less people of color. So again, an area that we're trying to do more work in, and that we clearly have more work to do to be able to reach out to communities of color to be more active in participating in these. Now looking at the results, again, we asked, the website, as you saw, had several different tools and ways to be able to provide comment. So we're going to start with going through the feedback on the goals, and then we'll go through the development policy areas and the land use plan. There's always trade-offs in trying to build tools like this. We focused the input on the goals because it's just a fewer number of them. We have policies and strategies. We made all of those goals, policies, and strategies available on the website for people to download and review. But when we asked them questions, we just asked them to rate the goals similar to what this group has done over the last few months. And that was a choice that we made to make it easier to access. And the challenge that you lose with that is you don't get the depth of detail of folks commenting on every single strategy, but that would have been 400 plus things to comment on. We thought that would be overwhelming for the public. But I think this does give a good overall perspective on what the participants thought about our different goals in these different areas. As you can see for the environmental goals, very strong levels of support. In the dark green is strongly support, light green support, yellow neutral, orange oppose, and red for strongly opposed. So strong majorities of support across the board for the environmental goals. There were a lot of positive comments submitted as well in this of people appreciating the fact that the county has a strong focus on natural environment and protection of environmental resources in this plan. So kudos to this group for helping develop those and seem to have resonated with the people who participated. And these are results for the ratings of the goals on the built environment. These first 10, BE1 through BE10, were the ones that really focused on land use. And these align with the first goal focused on the need for overall reform to our zoning code and development regulations, and then going through each of the development policy areas and setting up goals, policies around those. And again, you can see looking at the strongly support and support that you get strong majorities across all of these. A little more than neutral and oppose as we get down towards the bottom. And these Around 6, 7, 8, and 9 are where we start speaking about town centers, about transit, about corridor management areas. So the areas that we're talking about targeted development and revitalization, the numbers of strongly support and support start to wane a little bit, and a little more neutral and oppose come up. There are these additional goals in the built environment section that focus on housing. Those are goals 11 and 12. Community revitalization is that goal BE 13. Cultural and historic resources is 14. And transportation is 15, and 16 is the climate resiliency goal. So again, we still see high levels of support and strongly support coming over for majorities. And we see some more mixed feelings about affordable housing. And I think we see that you all are very active in the in tracking county council, and the bills are going for them around workforce housing. And you've been aware of the debates going on in the county about that, and that there's a range of opinions on that, and that's reflected in our survey here as well. Going over to the healthy communities section, these were the goals and policies that focused on public services, public facilities, including libraries, schools, recreation and parks, waste management, emergency and public safety. Again, strong levels of strongly support and support. And then, a few folks who have some concerns expressed as strongly oppose or oppose. And then our last section is the healthy economy goals. And these focus on, the first one is about aligning our economic development efforts with our land use policy and smart growth. And there was strong support for that. The second one is about business recruitment, retention, and expansion. And we saw strong levels of support and strong support there. The third and fourth are about, third is about supporting development around Fort Meade, and fourth, BWI, as two of our primary economic drivers in the county. You can see majority support, but also a few folks neutral and a few concerns. And again, reflecting conversations we've had in this group and elsewhere, with some of those communities also being concerned about the growth in those areas and the adverse impacts of that growth as well. Goal number 5 focuses on community revitalization. You see high levels of support and strong support there. And 6 was on mineral resources. And mineral resources is I think it sits a little bit like an odd duck in some of these, and some of the comments were just not understanding it. And people putting in some comments around saying, hey, I don't want to see fracking in the county. That mineral resources is a required element by the state in our plans. That's why it shows up here as such a as a prominent goal. And it really refers to the sand and gravel operations that occur primarily in the south end of the county. So that's what that one is about. And again, some of the folks that were knowledgeable about that, there were comments about support, as well as concerns about impacts to neighborhoods around that use. We also allowed people to give us open-ended comments on the goals. We received a lot of those, and here's a couple of key themes that came out. One was just wanting more specificity. As we mentioned, we focused the questions on just the rating the goals. So I think a lot of those folks who were asking for more specifics probably did not get through and see the policies and more detailed strategies. There were some good comments prodding the county to say, hey, you can write really nice goal language, but we really challenge you to make sure that you're implementing these, that you're being accountable to demonstrate to the community how these goals are being met. And you'll see more about that in the draft document and the implementation plan and the performance measures. And then one that got the most number of comments, being a specific open-ended comment, emails that came in to us, was around public water access. And the concern that in the goals around parks and recreation, we didn't explicitly highlight the need for public water access. Increasing public water access has been a high priority for the county. There's been a lot of investments in recent years. It's highlighted within the parks plan, the the Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan. And it actually has its own line item in the county capital budget for public water access. So this continues to be a high priority for the county. It wasn't highlighted as a goal. But in the same vein, we didn't highlight, say, ball fields as an alternative specific type of recreation. So we're thinking about how to best address this. We think that substantively, the priority is baked into the plan, into the goals, policies, and strategies, both in the Plan 2040 as well as the as well as the Parks Plan. And we're thinking about how best to make sure we can respond well to that comment. Any questions on these before we move on to development policy areas and plan land use map?
I have one more question, Michael. You didn't touch on the engagement graphs at the beginning of the report, but there were a couple of places on the chart about areas that were not identified. There are a couple of small slivers that have no location attached to them. And there's a place in the housing tenure map that is yellow that's also not identified. So there are places that if we're going to distribute this, we just need to fill in those gaps.
I will double check that. I think that may be a production and labeling issue. We get to have a lot of rows in some of those. I'll check. If there wasn't data, I didn't include it in the figures. So I'll check to make sure those labels are accurate. But thank you for pointing that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the development policy area map.
So
yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
Do you want me to take over from?
Yeah, please.
On this slide, Mike. So we did, this is Patrick. We did get a number of comments on the development policy area map that was proposed and shown in the online open house tool. And these are the three areas where there were a significant number of comments that are going to trigger a change that you'll see in the draft plan that's coming out. So first, on the Mayo Peninsula, there were a number of comments in opposition to the idea of a village center and a corridor management area running along the Mayo Peninsula. And so we're probably going to propose that this area can, be discussed in a bit more detail during the region plan process. And the Staples Corner area, we had proposed a village center in that area. This was an area that there was a village center concept discussed and graphically shown in the Crofton Small Area Plan. But we know that there has been a good bit of growth in the area since that time frame, and we did get a number of comments in opposition to the idea of the village center overlay being applied to the Staples Corner area. So that is one that maybe can be developed a little more fully in the region plan as far as what should happen in that area. And then third, corridor management areas in general, there seemed to be a little bit of confusion about what the corridor management area means, what are its implications, and particularly along Route 3, there were some concerns or comments related to the definition of the boundary in that area. So going back to the definition, the definition of the corridor management area was that these are existing and developed corridors where we want to improve safety and mobility and have infill and redevelopment and mixed use encouraged in order to preserve the adjacent neighborhoods. And so the key there is really that these are areas that are identified for investment to improve traffic management, to improve multimodal mobility, and also to have redevelopment that is mixed use in nature and compatible with the surrounding area that therefore reduces auto dependency in these areas. So the idea is really to address concerns in these areas that the corridors are overdeveloped and need some enhancement. So we may do some tweaking to the name to avoid confusion with transportation policy terms and to try to clarify the intent of those areas. So those are sort of, in a nutshell, some of the main comments that we got on the policy area map. And from here, I'll turn it back over to you, Mike.
Yeah, any questions or thoughts from the group about that? Yes, Pat. You're on mute, can you? And then Melanie will go next.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm just so happy to hear that someone's going to figure out safety and mobility on Maryland Route 3. I just can't wait to read what you figure out. We've been waiting so long for someone to figure that out. We're so excited. Thank you.
Let me temper expectations. I don't think we have a solution that you're going to read.
Oh, I'm sure if you're making us a corridor management area, you're going to have a solution.
I'm just saying, no, don't expect to see it tomorrow. Okay, Melody. Oh, Melody, we can't hear you. Uh-oh.
Unmute her phone. Uh-oh.
Did that work?
There you
Did
go.
that work? Okay. It told me to push *6. I don't know. Okay. I just want to clarify on the Mayo Peninsula because I'm going to have to report on this. So we're going to take out the corridor management and the village center, and then it will be discussed in regional planning. Is that what I understand? Yes.
Yes.
Mike is nodding his head. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
And the map on the page already is already representing that.
No, the map has not been updated yet.
No.
It's still there. Yeah.
Really? I'm looking at it right now and it's not there.
Yes, it is. It's right there.
It's right there.
I'm looking at it and it's not here.
It's there.
Wait for a couple days and it'll be gone.
All right.
We will all be on the same page soon.
His crystal ball is working better than mine. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
So I do have a question on that. So if you take out those two things, the corridor management and the village center, are you just going back to the peninsula? Or how are those areas going to be distinguished to go to the RPA, but none of the others are in the development policy area? You have some for land use, but are there any others that are going to the RPAs?
She's talking about.
Patrick, do you want to answer that one?
If I'm not sure I understand the question, Elizabeth. I think was your question, what is that area going to be replaced with on the Mayo Peninsula? And
Yes.
we'll dig in a little bit. I mean, most of it is in the Peninsula policy area, so it would go to that. And then at the edge there, without digging in deeper, it's either going to go to Peninsula or rural and agricultural. So we'll look a little bit more closely at where that line needs to fall on that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. The first part of my question, but then the second part of my question is, are there any other areas in the county that are being deferred to be determined during the RPAs?
Could
Any
you
other?
repeat the question? I can't understand her.
I think your question, Elizabeth, you're breaking up a bit, but if I understand correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, your question is, are there other areas of the county that are going to be where the development policy area is going to be changing and deferred to the region plan? Is that your question? These were the main areas of our recommendations that are going to be changing for this draft.
Thank you.
Okay. And then I think Kristen Pauley and then Pat Lynch.
Yes, I don't know exactly where this would be applicable, but these kind of areas and these that are a little bit controversial, and is there any chance of having drawings or diagrams or things that would help people visualize what is actually at stake or what are actually possible in these areas?
I think that's a good point. Being able to help visualize and understand what the potential is for these areas is something we've discussed internally. I think that's going to take more local conversation during that region plan process. And I think when we get there, we can talk more specifically with people about these local areas and be able to bring in, you know, precedent images, examples of other places, and drawings of what things could look like. So I think that's going to need to wait till region plan to get to that level of detail.
So the way it is now is it will be removed, and then how will people know whether they want to put it back in again or not? I mean, they probably won't, but just in case they did.
I think it'll be up to staff to remember to bring it up during the region plan process.
Mm-hmm.
And just explore, you know, these areas still, you know, they still exist as areas where there are, you know, primary roadways and areas of commercial activity that'll be, you know, reviewed in more detail in region plans about what the community wants to see as the future of those areas. Okay, Pat, and then Amy.
Yes, two subjects. I'm on Chris Phipps' Transportation Task Force group, and we are talking, everybody's talking about reduce auto dependency. And let me tell you, you're not going to reduce auto dependency in most areas of this county. And we're spending so much time talking about it. You'll bury me with my car. I live out on the Broadneck Peninsula. People live in Mayo. They live in Severna Park. You're not going to have people bike and go grocery shopping and drive back with laundry hanging off their steering wheels and boxes on the back of their bikes. This is an auto-centric geography. I'm from New York City. That was not auto-centric. We were very bus and subway oriented. This is not the area. You have also got, lost my train of thought. Oh, keep going and I'll think of it.
Okay, Amy Leahy.
So my question is, if somebody would just give me a little brief description of what exactly these corridor management areas are, because I'm a little bit confused. So maybe you could do that real fast, because I see that there's two of them here in Severna Park area.
So the definition that we're working with is that these are existing developed corridors where there are opportunities to improve safety and mobility, and infill and redevelopment and mixed use are encouraged to serve and preserve adjacent neighborhoods. These are areas that link the various components of the community, residences, businesses, and institutions, and form its economic spine. So that's the definition that we're working with on the corridor management areas.
If I could try to put that in more lay terms, I'd say that, you know, these are areas that along some of our primary roads, like Route 2, Route 3, where there is a concentration currently of especially commercial development, and where we know there are traffic issues, and areas that need to have some more focused planning and investment to try and address the traffic congestion. In some of these areas, we're seeing decline in some of those retail centers, so opportunities for revitalization. In other areas, we're seeing a lot of growth, so ways to manage that growth. So it's a way to identify that these are areas of special concern in the county, and that they need some focused attention.
Okay, so the one that's over there, you're calling it Route 3, over on the western part of the Severna Park area, which is where Benfield comes out. That area right there doesn't really, that's not really a high traffic congested area. That is, as far as I know, that's just Veterans Highway area, which is not a high traffic area at all. And what you're saying is that you're looking at it for mixed use, which it poses a real concern for me and for those of us in Severna Park.
Can you explain the concern about mixed use?
Well, Bill 6520 that was passed last night, for example. If it's a mixed use area now, it can be all 100% workforce housing.
So you're concerned about workforce housing coming in?
We're concerned about all the traffic and congestion that will come with that, because you're talking about, workforce housing is usually going to be high density stuff.
Okay.
Amy, can I suggest that if you have some concerns and you've looked at this map, everybody's had a chance to comment on it, then I would talk directly with OPZ and see what they have to say. Is the definition of the corridor managed area on the drive, on the Google Drive? And so, I'm sorry, Cindy?
Well, I was just going to say, the CAC helped to develop these policy areas, so I'm kind of putting it back on you to why you wanted these areas. I mean, some of them we started off with, like our town centers, some of the village centers that were identified in the small area plan, some of the mixed use areas that have already been identified, either both on the small area plan and or the 2009 GDP. But some of these areas, I'm not sure. So, and I think that's one of them. So that's, but in some cases, I'm not going to know why you're adding these, other than they're a part of a corridor or they're part of a community village center. I mean, those are more obvious. Some of them.
So Cindy, to answer that question, it's primarily the bills that are getting passed now that are changing the makeup of these mixed use areas. That's the concern, and this is what I've been arguing against all this time, is all of these bills that are being presented and passed by the council that are changing what's going on, changing the descriptions, changing the zoning, all that.
So I'd also remind you, in our strategies, we've talked about revamping our mixed use zoning categories. Right now they're based on there's commercial, employment, transit, and residential. And we had talked about looking at intensity versus type. So some of these could be low intensity uses, medium, high, just depending on the area. I mean, and we're not there yet because we haven't gotten to implementation of revising the mixed use zoning category.
So I'm just answering your question as to why this is a concern to us now.
Okay, so it's noted.
Hey, I would like to make a comment following on that issue. In the policy that addresses the corridor management area, it says to provide a mix of uses, which is different than mixed use. Because the way this is phrased, at a later time, the appropriate mix of uses would be determined. It doesn't necessarily mean mixed use the way it's identified in the zoning code or development regulations.
And then Pat Hooker, comment.
Yes, since we're on mixed use, this is one of our biggest concerns. The 2009 plan, land use plan, you had 4 categories of mixed use. They were, as Cindy just said, commercial, employment, transit, and residential. In the 2020, the mixed use land use has absolutely no qualifications. It's just one big happy group where you can build pretty much anything you want to. If that land use transfers over to the zoning qualifications, and you now have a mixed use zoning group that doesn't have percentages and setbacks and heights and all the things that the 4 that are there now have, that's gonna be a mess for our part of the county. I'd like to say that.
Yeah, so you're missing a couple steps.
Okay.
One is we're going to region plans, and that's going to define what those areas should be. And then, as I said, the revamp, if it is indeed going to be a mixed use zone, it would be rezoned during comprehensive zoning. But hopefully by then we've had a chance to assess our current mixed use zone and revise it to make it work in this county.
But will it be, excuse me, but will it be addressed? That's the concern. When it goes to comprehensive zoning, will the zoning have changed to match the land use, in which case you'll just be comprehensive rezoning into mixed use?
We went to 1, if I can, or go ahead, Cindy.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, if it is, then if we don't, it would be one of the mixed use zones that currently exist if we haven't had a chance to do that. I mean, hopefully it's one of our priorities.
Hey, can I take a stab at this?
Yes.
So in other places I've worked, when they've done smaller area planning, generally those plans have identified the kinds of uses that they want in areas, and sometimes brand new zoning districts are created to implement the vision. And that can happen here. That is an option. I think that we're limited by how the county has operated in the past, but there are other ways that we can operate so that what happens in a corridor management area in one part of the county is not the same as what would happen in another area.
Correct.
And let me answer the simple math question that Pat brought up. We went from having 4 mixed use land use categories in 2009 to 1 now. The intent is that we will not consolidate to 1 mixed use zone. The intent of that going 4 to 1 is just to align with what we did for, say, industrial and commercial, where there's just 1 land use but multiple zoning categories. It's a simpler, broader classification for land use versus the more detailed districts in zoning.
And yeah, that's correct. Just because we haven't had a chance to sit down with the communities and discuss what the area should look like. And Christina is right. We could have new zoning categories. I mean, that's during the small area plan process. That's how small business and mixed use were created in this county. And even small business back in some of the earlier plans is called residential business, just because it hadn't been officially adopted yet, but it was an idea that was being developed.
And can you expand on that a little bit more? Because I know that people have a lot of comments, a lot of different things between land use and zoning, number 1, and these regional plans. And we don't know who's going to go first, but how regional plans are going to be implementing zoning, because when we're done with this and the land use is approved and it all goes forward, then how do people know what the changes in zoning or what's proposed or what the options are or what out of the box new zoning could come forward.
And when?
So I didn't hear most of what you said, but I'll try.
Cindy, if I can try to repeat, I think
Yeah.
I think the core of the question was, can you explain the difference between land use and zoning? And then how that all relates to the region plans.
Okay. So we've talked about this quite a bit. Land use is what we're proposing now. It's a broad general categories. Basically residential, commercial, industrial, variations of density in residential. And then we have broader categories for commercial, industrial, and mixed use. And then during the region plan process, those will get synthesized some more just to make sure that those land use categories are going to implement what the regions want, the communities within the regions want. And then comprehensive zoning will occur with each region plan to implement the land use plan. So it's actually going to be the regulations. Zoning is not regulatory. I mean, land use is not regulatory. Zoning is the regulations. It'll have, the specific uses that will be allowed and the bulk regulations, setbacks and heights, density. Is that not answering your question?
It is. I'm just going to figure out, one of the things that we talked about, hopefully you can hear me better now, is what Christina was just referring to, is that when we get into the RPAs, it's possible that the RPA committee for that region will want to come forward with the new zoning category.
Elizabeth, I think that when the staff is working with the region planning committees, there's going to be additional visioning that goes on for these smaller region planning areas and refinement of the land use plan that comes out of the general development plan. And then it's really going to be staff that is going to provide ideas on how we could change zoning to implement the vision. I personally would not expect citizens to be able to provide that kind of technical expertise.
And I think one of the things that people have mentioned before, and I know there was some question about the small business districts. That's a zoning within commercial, and nobody's saying that that's going away. That's up to RWA.
No, I mean,
Well,
we just want to analyze it. We don't know. I mean, in some areas it might be working, and others it not. But it was a new category, and we don't get too many. I mean, I haven't seen too much development occur in small business, but that's why we say measure. Has it been effective? Do we need to change something about the requirements? That's all. That's all that means. We're not saying it's going away.
It already did go away.
It has not gone away.
Look at the map.
The zoning category exists.
The land use category has gone away, but
Yes,
the zoning has not gone away.
It will when the land use category goes away.
No,
Not necessarily, because really small business is a form of commercial.
And then Pat Lynch had a question. Is your hand still up, Pat?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. The two issues I wanted that I had forgotten was transportation. I've mentioned it many times, and many of us are concerned about transportation. We're talking about all these land use changes and eventual zoning changes, and yet I see nothing where we're working with state highways to look at a transportation plan that would help alleviate the low levels of service that we are studying and one of the groups I'm working on. And also the issue of workforce housing. There's no plan for workforce housing. It kind of pops up in different county council bills, and we have to look at it as if it's one of a kind and different reasons why. And yes, we don't know what workforce housing or what some of these developments that Amy Leahy talked about are going to end up being. But once you have a town center and a high rise, what is the transportation plan to support this? Again, we're talking about the reduction of cars on the roads. Well, what about helping us get these roads fixed and ready for more of these corridor management areas? We're not talking about that. We never do. And there is no plan. There's no transportation plan and there's no workforce housing plan.
An education plan.
So
They've thrown that out the window too.
the county does have a functional transportation plan called Move Anne Arundel. And parts of that have been incorporated into the draft general development plan, which you all are going to be seeing very soon. There's also a robust section on housing and affordable housing in the draft GDP.
Could you give me a couple of words on what is in the draft GDP about workforce housing? Because anyone I've talked to, no one remembers.
The built environment goals 11 and 12 and their supporting policies and strategies all speak to affordable housing.
Sorry, Patrick, what was that? I mean, sorry, not Patrick. Mike, what was that?
In the built environment, the goals 11 and 12 speak to housing and affordable housing.
So is there like a map where it shows us where workforce housing should be designated?
It's just goals and policies to be, implemented later.
Right, that's what we're trying to find out where. I know somebody has already done an analysis and has located only 4 places in Anne Arundel County, and he's a pretty sharp person where you could put workforce housing, and that the location is of some concern because we don't know where they are.
And we don't know how high the density will be. We don't know how high the buildings will be.
Right. Or the transportation situation, because you're trying to put workforce housing where people can walk to a transit operation. But we have no plan that actually defines or shows us where these are.
So I have a question for Pat and Amy. So these are criticisms that are growing out of recently adopted legislation.
No, I brought this up to Stuart Pittman months ago before when we were trying to work on a good thing, which is to find places for workforce housing. And along with that, we have a meeting with Stuart tomorrow. Along with that is, okay, what progress have we made? We still need it, and we don't have a plan. And yet it's popped up in Bill 1220 and 64. Well, 6420 is not workforce housing, but it could turn into that.
But typically for something like affordable housing, like, okay, so we don't say, well, I guess through zoning, we do kind of say where you can have large lots where theoretically you can have bigger houses. But that is typically implemented through zoning. Where would it be appropriate to have affordable housing? We would not look at a property by property, do a property by property analysis to say, oh, this property is where we should have affordable housing. We might say, this is an appropriate area because it's near jobs, it's served by transit, and then provide appropriate land use and corresponding zoning to allow it to happen.
Christina, the county is 95% built, and there are only a few spaces that are in the county that if you did a development called workforce housing development, that you could develop, or there's a possibility like the Glen Burnie revitalization that you could redevelop and have a place there for it. It's just not on any map, and it should be. Marley Station, is that a possibility? That would be great for transit because it's right on Route 2. But
And 100.
and yeah, and so, but we're just saying, here we are. And every time I read about workforce housing, I read that the CAC will take care of it. Well, it's not being taken care of.
So
Okay.
the other thing, flag that came up, not just the legislation that's been passed, but when we were looking at the land use maps, it became very clear that some of these land use designations along, say, Ritchie Highway right in Severna Park, suddenly they're called mixed use. Even though it's commercial, definitely, but they're being shown on this map as mixed use, right there in the heart of Severna Park on Ritchie Highway. So then you pass a bill that allows for workforce housing and mixed use, and automatically the flags go up because we have no idea where some of this stuff may happen. And we already have huge traffic congestion right there on Ritchie Highway. Everybody in this part of the county has been complaining about congested roads for years, and that would just make it worse.
Okay, I hear your concerns, and we will consider that as we continue to update the plan, but I think at this point we need to move on in the meeting.
Okay.
All right. There was a mention there of the planned land use map, and that's our next place on the agenda. So for the planned land use map, we had a combination of ways to comment on it. We had a survey where you could rate the land use map based on these different criteria, as well as an overall rating of the map. We allowed for open comments, just for people to type in what they thought. And then we also had, of course, the mapping tool where you can click on individual properties where there was a land use change application, we call it LUCA, or where staff had recommended a change of land use. We refer to this as SR for staff recommended. What you see on the screen now are the results from the rating survey. Based on the fundamental principles around the land use map of protecting the environment, protecting rural and agricultural areas, protecting neighborhoods, and focusing growth in targeted areas. And you can see that we had, again, it's the dark green for strongly support, light green for support, and yellow for neutral, orange, oppose, and red, strongly oppose. So you can see, as we saw in the previous ratings, high support for environmental protection, as well as strong support for protection of rural and ag areas and protection of neighborhoods. More mixed feelings about the targeted areas for growth and revitalization. And then here's the overall rating of the map. This is a tough question to ask. It's a big map with a lot of things going on. And what we see is probably about 20% of the strongest support. Then we get to the support, a lot of neutral right in the middle, and then oppose and strongly oppose on the left-hand side. And if you can look at this, I think, in different ways. You can say, well, the oppose and strongly oppose is just a little bit above 25, 35%. Or you could look at it the other way of saying the support and strongly support is around the 25, 30%. And I think this is one of those areas that reflects breadth of public opinion. That these kind of things are this big, you're not going to make everyone happy, and you're going to get a spectrum of opinion. A couple of the open-ended comments that come in here are questions about the natural features layer and concerns about how that changed from the 2009 GDP map. In the Plan 2040 map, we don't use that designation. We switch to calling places conservation and open space. So I think that's worth some discussion for this group, again, to remind you of why we did that. That was explained to this group in our meeting in July, and it was written up in the briefing paper. But just to clarify, when we dug into the natural features map, a lot of this analysis this go around was really enabled by the more accurate, more sophisticated technology we have to look at land use. The tools we have through GIS now are stronger than they've been in the past. And we're able to look in more detail, make sure we're aligning things with what exists on the ground. When we looked at the natural features layer, we couldn't support it with current information. You know, it was hard to decipher what that was actually built around. And so therefore it was hard for us to continue to support it. Instead, we took the ideas of it, that it was about what areas need to be protected, and put it into these conservation and open space designations. That did result in some properties looking like they went away from natural features to an adjacent, say, residential use that caused some concern for folks. But one thing to remember is that across all of these properties, whenever a project comes in for development review, we have our environmental regulations that apply across the county. And that's where the rubber really hits the road on, you know, protection of wetlands, protection of streams and their buffers. So this plan is both considering the land use designation as well as our environmental regulations. Cindy, did you want to say anything else about the natural features and open space and conservation?
And I think you covered it.
Okay.
Well, did you, I'm sorry, did you talk about, like, during region plan, we're hoping to get more?
Yeah, so that's another good point. These things will all be refined during region plans as well. One thing to note is that several comments came in about conservation designations that spoke to conservation easements that we didn't have record of. So we're able to go back and refine the map to make sure that we're reflecting appropriately things that have been preserved by easement into that conservation land use status. Another angle on the conservation that had some questions were people who were strongly supporting increased public water access, being concerned that some of the parks, like say Quiet Waters, were designated as conservation for their land use, and concerned that that was going to somehow be interpreted to limit the public access to the water there. And that's not at all the intent. The designation of parks as either conservation or open space was done in consultation with the Recreation and Parks program. And the primary question there was thinking about what is the primary use? You know, a lot of our parks have multiple features in them. There are areas that are set aside for natural protection. There are areas that have more active things like a swimming beach or a boat launch for public water access. And we're not anticipating any change with that. So we're thinking about ways that we can perhaps refine the definition of this conservation designation to make sure that's clear, that, you know, a conservation designated park will support public water access. Let's talk about the land use change applications next. First, some overall statistics on the input that we got on these. So we had 182 of these land use change applications. Public comment was received on 156 of them. So about 85% of properties had comments. Some of them just had no comments. The majority of the public comments supported the proposed planned land use designation. So that was 51% of the properties had, you know, in those, we asked people to rate whether you support the planned land use or oppose it or are neutral. And we had 51% of them support. And I should note too there, that ended up being a tricky question for some folks to respond to, because for the land use change applications, the property owner requested a land use change, and then there was a proposed change based on the staff analysis. So some folks who said, I don't support, they were actually saying, I don't support the property owner's request. And when they had the opportunity to choose a land use, they chose the one that was recommended for Plan 2040. So that number of 51% of the comments being supportive is actually probably lower than what it actually was. And then for opposition, about 6% of the properties had opposition where we had more than 20 comments and the majority opposed. And the reason that we added in that threshold about the 20 comments is just to, you know, to have a threshold if it was just a handful of people, 2 or 3 or 4 commenting. Now, of course, when we do the individual analysis, we take every comment into consideration. And there were some where there were just 2 or 3 or 4 comments that we're going to change decisions. But just for the purpose of looking at it overall, to get you a more clear sense about where there was strong opposition, we put in this number of that 6%. And now I'd like to ask Patrick to walk through some of these land use change applications where we're going to be changing the land use designation.
Right. So the first one I'll show you is land use change application number 71. This is just off of Fort Smallwood Road. This is a situation where the owner of an existing marina had requested maritime designation, and OPZ had originally recommended retaining the low medium density residential, but in some of the comments that we got, we received some new info. We did get over 60 comments that were opposing our recommendation of low medium density residential, and they across the board cited the site's existing use as a marina, that the marina use has been there for a number of years. And this was one that was the subject of a council amendment back during the comprehensive zoning process in 2010. And at that time, the owner at that time had requested maintaining the residential designation, but information since then, based on the comments and the information that we received, we're going to revise our recommendation to maritime for this one. And if you'll go to the next one, Mike. This is application number 76. So this is west of Route 3 at Braggers Road. Originally, it had been requested low medium density residential, and we were going to recommend rural. We are revising this one to public use because it's a site that the county has recently purchased to site a school and a park. So this will just be a cleanup to change this one to public use designation. And that's it.
Okay. And again, those are just a couple of the examples of the LUCAs. We didn't want to be exhaustive and tell you every one. And similarly, at a high level for the SR properties, the ones that staff had recommended from our analysis of properties that we thought we needed to make a change to based on its policy area, on its existing use and other factors. There were 67 of those. We got comments on 50 of them, so about 75%. About 62% of those properties that received comments, the public was in support of those. And there were 2 where we had more than 20 comments that were opposed. So Patrick, if you can talk through these, please.
So based on the comments that we received, there are a couple of changes to our initial recommendations that you saw in the online open house. And this first one is in the Glen Burnie area where Crane Highway meets Ritchie Highway. We're going to revise our recommendation from high density residential back to commercial. Commercial is what was in the 2009 land use. This is based on the property owner submitting information that the properties are actually in commercial use. So this is a cleanup. If you'll show the next one, Mike. This is a minor, there'll be a minor change in this area. So this area, we're going to retain the recommendation that we made, but there is a portion of this that we will put in conservation. There's one parcel that is owned by the county and is a passive use park. And so we're going to change a small portion of the of one parcel north of Allen Road there to conservation. Next slide, please. So this is one on Broadneck that we got a lot of comments about. Our recommendation, staff recommendation 50. So we got a lot of feedback, and I want to kind of share with you what our next steps are going to be. A lot of community members expressed concern that the change to rural, it doesn't really reflect the character of the community. They're concerned about potential difficulty in connecting to public water or improving their homes, and impacts on property values and taxes. So our intent in showing this as rural was really to look for opportunities on the peninsula to help control density and reduce some infill potential due to expressed concerns for traffic. And this area, these areas in particular are not in the public sewer service area, and there is some remaining development potential that if sewer were ever provided in this area, the built density could increase. So for what we're going to do for this draft, we're going to maintain the recommended land use of rural in the preliminary draft, but staff and the administration, we're going to be reaching out to all of the folks who made comments on this and to the community association leaders in this area. And we're going to discuss the land use change and its implications, and then get further input from the folks in this area for consideration. And if you'll go to the next one, Mike. This one is recommendation number 54. It's just we're going to make some minor revisions to some of those areas that you see highlighted there to maintain 2 or 3 of the parcels at low medium density residential. So it's just a cleanup of some of the existing use there. The next slide, please. So staff recommendation 65, we're going to change our recommended land use for this from low density residential to maritime. Maritime is consistent with what was in the 2009 land use plan, and it's consistent with the existing use and the current zoning. And just through the general comments function of the online tool and through general emails to the Plan 2040 email, we got a number of other changes that citizens had recommended to land use that were outside of either the land use change applications or the staff recommended changes. And so with some new information and research, these are things that we're considering and researching. Mike had mentioned previously a number of conservation easements were brought forth from citizen groups. One in Annapolis Roads, for instance. There are others from DNR. So we're looking at some of those. But there are 2 main areas that where we're going to be changing our recommendation, and I want to bring these to your attention. This one is the highlighted area in yellow in the center of the screen. That's off of Long Hill Road in Pasadena. We had originally recommended commercial in the online tool, but based on comments, we're going to be changing our recommendation to high density residential consistent with the adjacent properties and with the policy area for that area. And the one other area that I'll bring to your attention is this area that is just north of the airport. There are 2 areas. The area in red that's outlined in red, for that area, we're going to change our recommendation from industrial, and a portion of that was low medium density residential. We're going to change our recommendation to mixed use for this area in order to remove the isolated industrial area and to make this area consistent with the planned land use of the Nursery Road and Elk Ridge Landing corridor. And then the area that's outlined in the light blue that Mike is indicating there, just south of that, these are actually owned by the Aviation Administration. So our recommendation, we're going to change our recommendation to transit for that area, consistent with the planned land use that you see to the south and to the west there. So those are the key changes that that I wanted to highlight for you, that you'll see in the draft that's coming out next.
Okay, and Elizabeth? Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, I think I hear something now.
We can't really hear you. Maybe you can type a question into the chat box.
Okay. Well, I see Amy Leahy also has a question. Maybe we'll ask Amy and then come back to you, Elizabeth.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, well, now I can hear you.
Now we hear you.
Go for it, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I just wanted to clarify that these changes are going to be reflected in the draft. But what about all the other Lucas and SRs? Are they a done deal? Are they going to be reflected in the draft, or so people know what the options are going forward?
I was highlighting changes to the online open house tool was our recommended land use map. And these are changes to our initial recommendations that I was highlighting.
Right. But those Lucas are still going to be in the draft, correct?
As they were recommended in the online open house, yes.
And people can comment on them. If they haven't yet, then they will be able to comment on them. And then you have some additional, obviously. So for us, is there going to be a way? Probably not. This is a sort of question. Is there going to be a way for us who have seen it before to know the difference between the old draft versus the new draft?
Yeah,
Not really.
well, there must be.
Well, this is what I'm trying to highlight for you at this point. These are the key changes that you're going to be seeing in the draft land use plan that comes out with this full draft. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So my question is actually pretty much the same as Elizabeth's. When do we find out exactly what has been decided in these land use changes in this exercise? Because you went just through a few of them, but there are many more that were out there that I know people commented on in Severna Park, for example, and I'm sure other areas. So when do we get that information about what the status is of all of those others?
So when we release the public draft, you'll see the next stage of it. It's still a preliminary draft. And then we'll take additional comments into consideration, and we'll prepare another draft plan that we'll recommend to the Planning Advisory Board. They'll have recommendations for the county executive, and then it'll go forward to county council, and that's when it's, Elizabeth's words, a done deal. I mean, that's where it's approved.
So when is the draft? When do we see the draft?
Soon. We're releasing the full draft plan, including the land use map, in a few days.
Okay, and so we'll get a copy of that in a few days. And then we'll be able to make comments, maybe even just go through and see corrections, because, you know, just to make sure that, you know, well, let's face it, there are always mistakes that are made. So we just need to be able to look at those and flag them.
Yes.
Amy, you're going to be able to make comments. The full draft plan is coming out. You could send us a letter that's 3 pages long, or 5 pages long. You can, it's basically, you're going to get 320 pages, approximately. I mean, it's in that neighborhood. That's what's coming very, very soon.
Okay, thank you.
And how long will we have to comment on it?
At least 30 days.
Christina, can you verify volume 1 and volume 2? Because otherwise.
Volume 1 is in the neighborhood of 60 pages long.
Volume 1 and volume 2.
Volume 2 is a heavy read, and it is over 260 pages. That's how I got 320. I added 60 and 260, and I got 320. That's the neighborhood. I mean, I think you're going to like the format of volume 1. It's really user friendly. We didn't put the whole, you're still going to be critical because I feel that's kind of what you all like. But I mean, personally, I've read volume 1. I think it's amazing. And I think the staff has done a fabulous job. I think it looks good. I think it's organized well. And then all that background is in that 260-page volume. So, I mean, I was very excited when I read it. And I hope you will find threads of gold that you enjoy as well. I know I'm not expecting you to like the whole thing, but find some pieces that you like. And then, of course, tell us what you don't like.
We appreciate all the hard work that has gone into it. And
I mean, an amazing amount of work has gone into it. This staff has really put the effort in. And personally, I couldn't be prouder of the work they've done. And they have been amazing. So I hope you'll see it when it's out.
and comment and express to everybody else in your communities, because each of us need to look specifically at the areas that we're familiar with and comment accordingly, and make sure that you get the word out to all your HOAs, all your friends, all your little networks, please.
Yeah, and especially Michael showed you the statistics of who has commented. We definitely want to see more participation from the north and western portions of the county and the areas where there was light participation in the online open house.
Christina, can you talk just a little bit about your plan to let people know what's there so that they comment? I mean, how are we going to let the world know that it's open for comment besides something
Well,
on the
there
website?
is going to be a press conference and a press release. We are going to be using the county's social media through the, oh, I'm sorry. I know you can hear that. She thinks she's a German Shepherd. I mean, she's not. And I just lost my train of thought.
So there's going to be a press release, a press conference.
Yes.
We'll be coordinating with the Office of Community Engagement and Constituency Services to use their networks.
Through the open houses that we had with the county executive when the online open house came about, we increased, Plan 2040 increased its mailing list significantly. So we're going to be pinging all of those people. I mean, we're going to try and get it out as widely as we can, but there is going to be a major press effort when it goes out.
Can you
And
guys
Melanie?
hear me? Yes, but I don't know how to be heard.
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
You're on, Melanie.
Yes.
Ah,
Go ahead.
good. Sorry, I wasn't sure, Mike, if you saw my in the chat. I asked a question about the land use map. There should have been some requests coming from the Mayo Peninsula about the Mayo Water Reclamation Facility becoming all or part conservation. Was there any discussion about that? I know that Rec and Parks has pinged it for some facilities, but there's significant forested and wetland area. Has any of that been identified for conservation?
I mean, not at this time. You know, right now I think it's public use. Once if Parks takes it over and prepares a plan and it's primarily conservation, I mean, maybe this could be a change. This is an example of a change that could occur during the region plan process if that has been identified at that point. Remember, we're going back to our definitions. It's the primary use of the property, and that's one that's transitioning.
Is it possible that I mean, there's a large parcel that's owned by the county transitioning from Public Works to Parks and Rec, right? So is it possible that that can be broken up into and separated out? I mean, obviously, that it doesn't have to be all encompassing as, you know, public use. Some of it can be divided out as conservation,
I mean, I can ask,
even before.
but I think it's a little early in the stage yet. But I can reach out to both Parks and Public Works. I don't want to just draw an arbitrary line on the map if we're splitting a
No,
parcel.
I think it's got some identifying geographical features that would help identify that. But yeah, okay. I mean, I think it's definitely worth pursuing as we all talk about stormwater management, and there should be no reason to lose more forest and damage more wetlands that we, you know, if the county already owns it, that's exactly one of the things that we're, at least from an environmental standpoint, trying to foster, right, is maintaining those natural resources.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Because I'll start with our land use map in general. Just a couple of points, and then try to move on. So as Mike showed, we, you know, primarily have support for the overall land use map based on the feedback that we received during the online open house. We made a few changes, but you know, those are minor in the big scheme of things. The overall land use map hasn't changed other than these few minor changes. And we've attempted to put together a preliminary draft plan that, in combination with our goals, policies, and strategies in the plan that you all have helped develop and have input on, are putting together a plan that balances protection of environment and provides for some future development and redevelopment in areas where there's existing infrastructure. And so at this point, we're asking whether a majority of the CAC concurs with this preliminary draft land use map. And that doesn't mean you're going to agree with every decision that's out there, specific land use property, you know, on specific properties. And we know that there'll be areas that we all have to agree to disagree. But, you know, can you live with this overall preliminary land use plan for the county as we move forward through the rest of this process? I think Mike has sort of a way. We're gonna, I guess, ask for a show of hands, maybe for those that are on telephone, or just voice your yay or nay. But yeah. There's the reaction. You want to use the reaction tool?
That works too. And if you can just, if you do that, leave it up for a moment, and we'll count hands. So you can either put up your hand in real life or through the virtual emojis there. You'll find those at the bottom of your screen in those reactions, or over in the participants list. You can use the tools there underneath more.
If any of you did it, it only holds for a second. So if you've done a thumbs up, can you do it again, please?
It's like somebody needs to count.
Mark's doing the counting.
You need to vote, people. I don't see everybody voting.
Wait a minute, you only have one way to vote.
They said hands up if you agree.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, so let me just look over this. So let me actually go over to folks that don't agree. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong here. Pat Lynch does not agree, correct? Pat?
Pat, you're muted.
She does not agree, correct.
Okay. Karen, do you agree or disagree? Agree,
Yes.
okay. Good, thanks. Pat Hooker?
Disagree.
Okay. Will Shorter?
So it's not agree or disagree. Can you live
Well,
with? Yeah.
can you live with?
Or not live with?
Okay. I didn't see Will, sorry.
I don't see him. He may have had to drop off.
Okay. Gary?
No.
Okay. Elizabeth? White?
Thought she was a yes. Yes.
Okay, she's a yes. And Amy?
Disagree.
Okay.
Could we go
So
back?
that's,
Can we go back to Karen? I wasn't sure if she did an thumbs up or thumbs down.
I wasn't in agreement, but what I'm asking is there was some clarification on the question and how it was worded.
Can you live with the Plan 2040 draft as presented currently?
The land use.
The land use.
The land use part, sorry.
okay, thank you. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of everyone here. And that's 10 out of 14 members again that are here.
Charlie Mannion, did you give us?
Yeah, I've got an agree.
Okay, I didn't have.
Hey,
him.
Mark, I might go through each name individually and get an agree or disagree so you can
Okay.
make sure it's accurate.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Melanie Hartwig Davis,
Yes.
Bill Dodd. Thumbs up. Okay. Kristen Pauley,
Yes.
Pat Lynch,
No.
Karen was up. Okay. Charlie Mannion, Pat Hooker,
No, disagree.
Kate Bauer,
Yes.
Anthony Brent.
Yes.
Yes. Gary Mahler,
No.
Elizabeth. Thumbs up. Amy Leahy,
Disagree.
okay, and Matt Korbalek. Thumbs
I'm in.
up. Okay. So again, that's 10 out of 14.
I think we're 13
Members.
at the moment since Will dropped off. But still,
Yeah.
majority can live with the land use map as drafted. Remember, it will change. Okay, do we want to go through Cindy adoption process?
Your next steps. We kind of touched on that. So this is your last meeting. The next steps is this will go out for public review. Staff will consider that public review, and it'll be the entire draft. It'll include the land use map. We'll have the interactive, or you'll be able to go on the web again, and Mike or Patrick, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll have the land use map, the development policy area map, and the is it the resource sensitive policy area? Map that you can zoom in and see versus trying to read the plan version. So that'll go out for public review. People have the ability to make comments. They're open-ended comments. There's not really a survey included. We are going to try and collect demographic information. It's the one way we can measure if if we're doing a better job of reaching a more diverse crowd. After that, we'll take the comments into consideration, and we'll prepare a draft for the Planning Advisory Board. At that point, we'll give a briefing to the board, and then they'll hold a public hearing, and you'll have the opportunity to comment at that Planning Advisory Board hearing. Imagine it will still be a Zoom meeting, and then there'll be written testimony that'll be taken. And then their role is to provide recommendations on that draft to the county executive. And then, that'll get turned over into the executive deciding, what goes forward with introducing what plan that we'll introduce to the council. So those are the next steps. We're winding down really to the end now. I want to thank you all for hanging in there and your participation and volunteering countless hours of reading. The good news is the plan that you'll see, you've read most of it. I'd say 90–95% of it you won't have seen. I mean, you will have seen before. It'll be in a different format. Hopefully, as Christina says, you'll like the format. Volume 1 is intended to be what we're calling the action plan. It's user-friendly. It gets to the point. It's not a lot of the background data. It's the version that I see being dog-eared by planners, because it'll be used often, and residents, as they're trying to use it to make sure that the strategies are being implemented. And then volume 2 is the background data that supports volume 1. So I hope you stay involved throughout the rest of this process, and then into the region plans, and encourage friends and neighbors and to participate throughout the rest of this process, and also volunteer as we get into region plan process. So thank you. Christina, Steve, do you have?
No, I just want to echo what Cindy said. I mean, any kind of planning process, especially a general development plan, is a long process. When you sign on for a citizen advisory committee, it's a big commitment, and you all are still here at the end. There is a lot more to go, because now is when things really get interesting, when the public starts to get engaged. We go to Planning Advisory Board, we go to the County Council, and we really do encourage you to stay engaged, because some of the things that are most important to you can potentially change as the document starts to become political.
No, and let me add, many thanks for your very, very hard and diligent effort. I know it's been a long, long time. If it means anything, every one of these efforts I've been involved in over the last almost 33 years have been extremely challenging, difficult for everyone involved. It's understood that we're not all going to be in the same place at the same time. That has been my experience everywhere else, and I think we've shown that we have different points of view. What I want to leave you with, I think, is the most important thing as the GDP moves forward, as we start the region plans. You're working with a general planning document now. Much more detail will happen in the region plans. That is where zoning changes will occur. And from the administration or Office of Planning and Zoning, that's where the bulk of the text amendments that will be presented. Please keep in mind that the vast majority of the text amendments that you are referencing and frustrated with are not coming from the administration. They are coming from individual council members, and that is a normal thing in my experience that happens as well. But we have to react to those in real time, because at this point, there isn't a law, and the council members don't seem to want to self-police and not introduce, I'm going to say, citizen-sponsored text amendments. The last thing I want to add, the most important thing that my staff, all of us want to bring to you is there's one word, and the problem is I can't prove it to you today, and it's implementation. Whatever we're going to have plans, whatever's going to come in code, whatever zoning districts are going to be, whatever gets adopted, we have to implement it. Otherwise, it will have been a wasted effort. And I know that we have been, when I say we, the county, have self-identified that as being a problem. None of us want to work on plans, rezonings, text amendments that are never implemented. That is a waste of our time and a waste of our career. So I want to leave that with you. Keep that in mind, the value of implementation. So thank you.
Question.
Yes, go ahead, Pat.
And it's perfect here. It's text amendments. I don't know what a text amendment as opposed to an ordinary amendment as opposed to some other type of amendment to the county code is. I have not been successful in researching it. I don't know the process. I have heard at Monday night's council meeting, I heard that many text amendments would be introduced. Today I just heard that the council can introduce them. I thought planning and zoning was going to introduce them. You can see I am totally confused. So what I would like someone to do is to send me some resource. I couldn't find it in the code, but it's got to be there somewhere that can explain what a text amendment is, the process for text amendments being introduced and passed. And if, since Mr. Ziegler, Kyle Ziegler mentioned on Monday night that the Plan 2040 would have considerable text amendments to be made. If you know now what any of those are, could you please send them to?
Let me interrupt you. I did not say that. What I said is
I'm sorry.
2040 will recommend a variety, a lot of text amendments. That's very different.
Then could you send me the recommended text amendments that are going to be associated with the 2040 plan?
We don't have those to share with you today.
There's a lot of them.
I understand. At a point in time when it's ready for text amendments to the zoning or subdivision code are ready, they will either come through the administration or there'll be a friendly acceptance by a council member to introduce them. It will be done in the form of a bill, and it will go through the legislative process. I don't have anything that I can send you now.
Okay, so the planning and zoning does not make text amendments. The administration makes text amendments, or the council itself makes text amendments.
Planning and zoning cannot introduce a text amendment. We can draft text amendments.
Okay.
And they will either come through the administration or they will come through the council.
Okay. And is there some place this process is written down that I could actually read it?
We will try and draft something for you. That's about the best I can do to respond to your question.
It's not written, a text amendment is not defined anywhere in the code or anywhere in any of the county documents?
We will try and provide you a response that makes sense to your question, okay?
Steve, if you could share that with all of us, because I had similar questions to what Pat had asked. So I'd love to see just a paragraph that explains that to us.
Okay.
I think there's some confusion between the bills. For example, the bill that went through is being referred to as a text amendment.
It wasn't.
And so, as Pat said, if we can just get some clarification and send it to all the CAC, it might be helpful. So I know Amy has her hand up.
Yeah, so there again, what Steve was saying, he's calling these bills that were passed by the council, he's referring to them as text amendments.
Right.
And they're not. They're actually council bills that are put forward by council members. And you know,
They're two different
one of the concerns that we have had in the past is what we call spot rezoning. And I kind of feel like what's happening with all of these bills that are being put forward by individual council members with the support of the administration is the same thing as spot rezoning, which we've been trying to avoid doing. So that's.
So I'm gonna disagree with you again. A text amendment is the same thing as a bill. It's also legislation. A text amendment is simply changing the regulations, the land use regulations. It occurs formally through legislation, and the term we use is someone drafts a bill. But what we will do is we'll draft a couple paragraphs. It won't be one paragraph, but we'll try and, I understand your question, and we'll try and explain it in a way that makes sense. So it appears there's a lot of confusion. As an example, the workforce housing bill, I think there was a lot of thought, concern, that was initiated by the Office of Planning and Zoning or the administration. It was not.
I didn't say.
It came through the county council. That's where it originated from. The vast majority of these I'm going to say site-specific text amendments, bills, legislation do not come from the administration. They come from individual members of the county council.
Understood. Understood. I did not say that it was administration bills.
One quick planner definition term to hopefully help clarify. We say text amendment because it's changing the text of the zoning code versus a map amendment where we would change the colors of what the zoning district is on a map. So that's why we say in the planning world, a text amendment versus a map change.
So what, exactly, appreciate that, because it is a code change. They're referring to it as a text amendment, but it is a bill and it is a code change. So you're changing the text within the code, the wording within the code. So that's why it may not be, there's nothing in the code that refers to a text amendment.
Right,
You were looking
gotcha. Thank you, Elizabeth.
He had a question.
This is a slight digression from where we are, but it goes back to the discussion of implementation, and it's a request. My sense is that over the last, 18 months or so that we've been working together, each of us has made, in addition to the context we had in our areas in the county, we have made additional contacts on behalf of the GDP work. And I would think that the members of this body are a great source of suggestions for potential candidates for the regional advisory groups. They're going to take this to the next stage. So I'm formally asking that the staff reach out to the members of the CAC for suggestions for people to serve in that next phase of the work that we're doing.
Understood.
Great idea. Thank you.
So we have our special guest has entered the meeting.
Who's that?
Am I special?
Yes.
Okay. In a good way, right?
Yes, yes. We have the county executive. He's here for just a couple minutes. Cindy's thanked you, Steve has thanked you, I have thanked you, and now the county executive is going to thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you. Thank you definitely for your service. I know that this has been a difficult job and a long job, and that not everybody has agreed with each other all of the time, which is to be expected. I've sort of tried to stay somewhat separated and not get involved as things move along. And I've got to say that when the Plan 2040 at Home came out, I was really kind of thrilled, partly because it was so much fun to look at the land use designations map and play around with that, and to go out and to do meetings in the different parts of the county with the planning staff to introduce that to people, but also the categories that were set up with new language. I liked. Most of them had to do with preservation and neighborhood preservation areas. And then the ones that were the growth areas I knew would be the controversial ones, the ones where the village centers and the corridors, which I don't even consider growth areas. And maybe some of that language is going to be tweaked because they're not necessarily growth areas. I think they might be redevelopment areas. What I think is probably a little frustrating for some people, and maybe some of you, is that so much of what everybody was hoping to fix now in terms of getting a handle on the way growth happens in the county and preserving open space happens in the county, so much gets pushed into the regional plans. And I know everybody wants to fix it now, but when we did small area planning before, people really felt strongly that that was the level where they could really have influence. And so I really liked pushing a lot of this into the regional planning process. And I know that means okay, postponing things. But I think it's going to be what people wanted to begin with. So those regional plans are going to be much more robust, and there are going to be a lot of mechanisms to ensure that they get adhered to, that they get followed. And same with the GDP. It's no longer going to be considered just a list of recommendations. So a lot of the real work, the way I see it, to make sure that we deliver on the agenda that I ran on, is going to happen in the legislative process as well. So you might have noticed that we stole Lori Rhodes from OPZ, that Lori Rhodes is moving over to my office as the deputy CAO for land use. And she's going to continue to do a lot of the work that she was doing in OPZ. But one of the things that she was doing, in fact, let me back up and say that it was a thrill for me when I came in to find that there were people in plan and zoning who didn't like the way things had been going in the past. And Lori Rhodes was one of those people. And Lori Rhodes had been keeping a list of all the legislative changes that needed to be made to our code to make it possible to really implement a good plan and really implement a regional plan and really ensure that we protect the land that we're trying to protect and to really ensure that when we do development areas that there's community input and that we have potentially the ability to do, I guess, what some call performance zoning, so that the decisions that get made in the process of development review are actually consistent with the GDP, consistent with the goals that we all have. So I believe that Lori's role in my administration is going to make us more responsive. It's going to make it, we're putting her in a position and that agenda in a position where we really are going to, if we can get the council to pass all the legislation that we're going to want them to pass, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. Forest conservation was not an easy thing to get through, and we didn't get the bill that we wanted. But if we can, with her and with our really new team at OPZ, and I have to say that these new planners, bunch of tree huggers for the most part, that have been brought in the last year, really do, I think, see the world the way I see it and see the world the way a lot of you see it. Not necessarily the way the development interests see it. That we do that and we do the legislation and we do the regional plans, that we really are going to deliver on the 2040 principles. If we don't, then I will consider myself a failure as county executive, because it's what I ran to do. And I know that we don't have it all right. So we're going to introduce this GDP, I guess next week, the draft that you all worked on. Then there's the first public comment period. And I'm actually going to suggest and probably announce that it be extended from a 30-day comment period to 45, so that the community groups have time to convene, to review, to make sure that their additional comments are presented after review by their neighborhood organizations. And that it may even be necessary to do additional comment down the road. But we're entering that phase. We have to, I have to sell what's good in this GDP, get people to buy into this GDP so that, including the council, so that they don't ignore it in the future, which is what happened before. The council did the rezoning and said, oh, well, we weren't part of the GDP, and so we're going to ignore it and zone how we want to zone. So it's turning out to be, it's a big job. It's a complicated job. It's a job that takes place that's never done. So that's why these regional plans are going to be sequential, and it's going to take a long time to get through them. But I think we put the stake in the ground, and I think our residents have been clear about how they feel about development. I think the concept of smart growth has been, we're gradually getting people to buy into that. I know it's controversial when it comes to workforce housing, but the way I see it, we can protect open space, we can get cars off the road, we can help to clean up the bay, we can preserve the character of neighborhoods, we can promote and encourage agriculture to maintain open space, and hopefully, and then we can end up with quality of life and little town centers as well as the bigger town centers, hopefully with transportation options available, multimodal ones, so that we turn this big ship around and try to get ourselves to the place where we can deliver on all the things that I know that almost every one of you is on this CAC to deliver. So while I know the work is not done, and you probably feel that way, like, damn, I got on this thing and I thought we would fix everything with the GDP. I think that probably wasn't possible, and that this is a really good start, and that we can't let up, but we have to deliver on the rest of this. So we're going to be calling on all of you in the future, whether it's to participate in the regional plans, whether it's to help advocate for good legislation, or to tell us when we've got legislation wrong, because there's going to be a lot of land use legislation coming up. So my message is our work's not done, but thank you for everything that you've done so far. And I guess I don't really have time for discussion and questions, because I am at the Southern District Police Headquarters right now, getting ready to meet with the Community Relations Council, Police Community Relations Council, about policing. So,
County Executive.
Yeah.
I did want to let everybody know that the administration has prepared executive citations for everybody. It's a little different getting those during COVID. So what we're going to do is we're going to mail them to you. Normally we would have given them to you in person, but that's not going to happen. So I will be picking them up from the county executive's office, and then OPZ will mail them to you. So if we've sent you an email asking for your address because we don't have it, that's the reason. It's not that we're going to come visit you.
Yeah, we should be doing some sort of a celebration and a party, but I guess we can't quite do
that.
We do have one more piece of business. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. We appreciate your kind words, and so thank you all. But I do need a motion to approve the minutes from July 29th. I know
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye, County Executive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have a motion?
Yeah, I know.
Thank you. Sorry, we were saying goodbye. Okay, so Pat moved, and second from Pat Lynch. All approved?
Aye.
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 Anybody say nay? Any abstentions? Anything else? Okay, approved as written. Thank you, Mark, for doing those. And thank you all. This has been a long road. It has been a bumpy road for some. It has been extra long for a few. And so we do appreciate it. Please stay in touch. You have my email. Our job is not over, as the county executive says. I will be making a presentation to the Planning Advisory Board. I will also be going before County Council and everything else. So please stay in touch. I try and respond to everybody, and I appreciate all the hard work that you all have put into it. So thank you. Gary.
Yeah, when will our accounts be taken down?
I'm sorry, well, I didn't hear your question.
When will our access and email accounts be taken down?
Oh, good question. I don't know. Administration or OPZ?
Those are Gmail accounts that you created. Right? I mean, you created them.
Yeah,
I can't
I
remove
created them or put them all together.
Yeah.
So
I have a question.
When you want to take yours down, I would say until it's approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would think it should stay up until it goes before County Council.
Can you guys continue to send the dates and the activity of when you're going to be doing these things and keep us in the loop, right? Mike is nodding his head. Excellent.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Are we all supposed to be on the regional planning, or is this something that we may not continue with the regional plans, each of us individually, since we're
It'll be an application process, so no, you're not automatically on it. It's an application process just like it was to be on the CAC. And we have not gotten those applications, the forms and everything done yet. There will be specific requirements to be part of the RPAs, and we need to figure out the numbers exactly, because how many are going to be on each one. So we haven't gotten that far down the road yet. There will be a public announcement when applications are being accepted by the county executive's office.
I'd like to thank you, Elizabeth, for being our fearless leader. I know it was a herding cats exercise, but you've been had great goodwill, and I appreciate it. And the staff too. I mean, it's been amazing work. So I enjoy getting to know so many fellow citizens, and I hope it's all going to pay off.
Exactly. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you, Kristen. I think Pat
I
had a
agree
question.
100%. Thank you all.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I was just going to say thank you for your leadership and your cheerleading. Also to Cindy and your wonderful staff. We can't say enough good things about all you've done. The talent, the IT expertise that you brought forward. It's been a pleasure working with you. And to Steve Kaisigler and who else? Christina, all of you. You'll be missed.
We can have you come back. We'll keep on going if you really want to go.
We got a long way to go. We got a long way to go.
Yeah.
And the GDP is the beginning, and then it's region plans, it's comp rezoning, it's lots of text amendments, bills, legislation. Yeah, and it's all about implementing these policies.
We will one day have a reunion and a big party to celebrate.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do you have a motion to officially adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you all. Have a great night.